Hi guys, I did the 2018 reading challenge on Goodreads. I set myself the challenge of reading 50 books. I only read 45, but I can deal with that, that's fine. I'm recording this in the middle of December, so it's possible I'll finish another couple off before the end of the year, but I don't think I will get to my 50 target. That's fine, I'm okay with that. I'll link my Goodreads below so you can see exactly which books that I did read, but I'm just going to go through them quickly and do a brief overview. My favourite book of the year was actually one of the first ones that I read, which was RADIUM Girls. This is about ladies in a factory who were painting the dials on for like aeroplanes and military equipment, and they were painting using radium. And as part of that process, to make the very fine marks, they dipped the paintbrush into their mouth before and after putting it into the radium. And they had all types of illnesses and things because of that, and the companies denied that the radium were causing it. And it's a really nice story. It follows them very personally, follows their careers and them getting ill, and then them trying to fight the company and get it acknowledged that it's the radium that is making them ill. I do like non-fiction books, and this is great. It's a real story, and you're reading it and just think this can't have happened, it can't be true, and it was. So that was a really good one. Another one that I really enjoyed, but was much more light-hearted, was How the Music Got Free. I grew up in the age of Napster, and it's about how the music was leaked at that time from the record companies and how there was such a big business in piracy. And in turn how that led to digital distribution today. So that was quite interesting. Last year I mentioned several times the Olive Farm series by Carol Drinkwater, and I finished that at the start of this year. There were several more books of that I hadn't read, and I actually listened to them on audiobook. That was amazing, so I finished up that whole series and thoroughly enjoyed it. I also read A Lab of One's Own. This was because there was a big celebration for women in science earlier in the year. It was a really interesting read. It was about the hidden jobs that women did during the war and just weren't acknowledged that the women were putting in this work. The women would be going into these defence places and they would be on letterhead as like the secretary, but actually they were scientists that were leading up labs. And it isn't until more recently, when they started getting OBEs, people are like, what were those women actually doing? The only trouble with the book I found was there are just so many unrecognised women. It was very long lists of, some people only got like a mention of a paragraph because there were just so many people to mention. And a lot of people, there just isn't that much information out there about what they were doing. So it's unrecognised women in the field of science, particularly during the war. A really interesting read, but I would have liked more depth. It could probably be about 5 books and really like focus on the women. The trouble is there's just not that much information out there. As it came into April time, I had really bad morning sickness, and I just didn't have the focus for non-fiction, which is unusual for me because that's usually my preferred genre. But I was reading lots of detective stories. They had a nice pace to them. It just was easy reading. So I read now I wrote them down. I read all of the Rachel Abbott series, which is DCI Douglas, and then I also read all of the Rebecca Muddiman series, which is Gardner and Freeman. And I read as well a lot of Claire Macintosh, yes, and that was more like psychological thrillers, and the same like B.A. Paris as well. So I had a few months where I was just reading, I wouldn't say, easy reading I guess, just the fast-paced psychological thrillers or detective mysteries. I just devoured them and I enjoyed them all. Once I was back on the non-fiction, I was interested in the brain and how we learn. So I read Natural Born Learners, which was about different education styles across the world and how people's brains develop, and if there is a best method for educating children or for retaining knowledge. And it was just a look at different education systems. It was actually really interesting. And I also read Spark, which is about how exercises affects the brain and how important it is to exercise and the effect that has on the brain to do with learning, memory and all of that kind of things. That was an interesting one too. And I'm currently reading, what's it called? The Art of Changing Your Mind, which is by Michael Pollan. Now I read a lot of his books previously to do with food. Probably his most famous one is The Omnivore's Dilemma. This one is about the effects of LSD on the brain and how it's not always a bad thing, and some people are using it in ways to kind of expand the mind, and it all sounds a bit kind of 70s hippie drugs free-for-all, but actually it's about using it in a controlled way and looking at the outcomes, that the positive outcomes that LSD can have. I also read Genius Foods, which was about foods and the effect that they have on the brain. So everything, exercise, drugs and food, and how it affects the brain were of interest, books of interest to me this year. And Genius Foods, I enjoyed it, and it only came out this year, so the research was cutting edge. The only thing was it used a lot of pop culture references that I think, even for me, I found it a bit jarring, and I think will date it very quickly. There was a lot of references to TV shows and things, and not all of them I got, and they kind of took you away from the narrative when you were like, oh, well, where's that reference from? So yeah, that one was okay, but the effects of food on the brain and the research that it linked, it did feel well researched, so that was interesting too. And then finally, I also read some parenting books. I didn't find any one book that really hit the spot and covered everything, one book that was just a good fit for me, so I read around a little bit. One I quite enjoyed was the Mama Natural Week by Week Guide to Pregnancy, because I follow Genevieve on YouTube, and that was one that I wanted to get. Again, it was kind of based at an American audience, that one was, and there was some stuff in it that just wasn't for me, and I think that was generally the theme with a lot of the parenting books. It's just pick and choose what is useful to you. I think that is everything. I've got a few little notes here. Oh, the other book that I did want to mention was CHAVS, The Demonisation of the Working Class, which is quite topical at the moment, and it's about poverty porn and the types of shows that you see on TV that like really demonise people from backgrounds where they're struggling, and just trying to look at it from a different angle, and how the media portrays them, and why they're trying to say that these people are bad. That was really interesting, and it fitted in with a couple of books that I read last year, which was the Vanishing American Adult and the Hillbilly Elegy, I think it was. Yeah, that was interesting too. It kind of rounded up and followed on from those, but it was a UK based one, so that was good. Yeah, and that is the main books I read this year. Let me know if you've got any recommendations for next year. I think I'm going to set myself a slightly smaller challenge next year and maybe go for 26 books. That's one every couple of weeks. That seems doable. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.